Welcome to the next lesson in Mesopotamia. We're going to talk about Mesopotamian farming and division of labor. All right, so yesterday we talked about the problems that the river caused the Mesopotamians, and one of the problems was flooding of the rivers destroyed crops, killed livestock, and washed away homes. So to solve this, we figured out that they could create levees. Now levees are this built up dirt, rock, wood, and natural material alongside of a river to keep it from flooding. So these levees would allow the river to flood, but it wouldn't allow it to, it would allow it to rise, but not spread into the crops and into the homes, killing the land and the people. So they created what we call levees, which are built up material alongside a river. And if you think about it, it's actually pretty amazing that these people were able to do this. Because nowadays we would use heavy duty construction equipment to build up this material and to get it from point A to point B. However, back then they had nothing like that. So they had to do all of this by hand. Right, then problem number 2 was people lived miles away from the river and it left them without water. So now they've kept the river from flooding, but now they need to have water getting to those cities that are miles away. So to do this, they built canals. Okay, canals are man-made waterways. Okay, so we have a lot of water systems today, canals, sewer systems, all that kind of stuff that allows us to get water from point A to point B. We can pretty much get water from one spot to another or to any place using the technology that we have today. So again, if you think of back then, to make these waterways, this has to be a very large hole and a very long hole. I mean, this is miles and miles away from the river at some points. So this is a lot of work, especially when they didn't have such advanced tools. So just imagine the time and the effort that it took these people to get this done. It's actually kind of amazing. So the use of levees and canals allowed the Mesopotamians to use irrigation. Now, irrigation is to artificially supply dry land with water. Artificially means fake. And it's not that it's fake water, but it's fake rain. So when people are waiting for the land to get moisture, typically, especially around our area, we just wait for rain because we do get rain. We get rain, we get snow, we get the moisture that we need for the most part for crops to grow. However, we talked about the climate in Mesopotamia being very hot and very dry. So they're not able to get that water that they need. So they were able to use the canals to hold on to water and then water their farms and their crops when they needed it. So a modern day example of irrigation would be a sprinkler. Right? So if it hasn't rained in a long time and the grass is getting really brown and we want to make it look nicer or we want to water the crops so that way the corn grows, what we do is we use sprinklers. We get water from a lake, a river, wherever it's being pulled from, and we put it through the sprinkler system and that waters all of the vegetation. So being able to use irrigation because of the levees and the canals, this caused a surplus, an extra supply of something. So an example of a surplus. So Maria Sharapova has a surplus of tennis balls. I don't think she needs this many to play tennis, so that means she has an extra supply of them. So irrigation allowed Mesopotamians to have a surplus of food because now, instead of needing everybody to farm at one time, they were able to have one person farm for a long time. So they were able to farm almost year round and then make as much food, even more food than they needed for their city state. So because of this, they were able to have create division of labor. So division being split and labor being work. So they split the work. And not that they split what they had to do, but they started to change what they were doing. Okay, so division of labor is different jobs based on different abilities. So we see division of labor in everyday life. Not everybody has to be a farmer anymore. You have teachers, you have police officers, you have librarians, you have convenience store workers, you have mayors, governors, lots of different jobs, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. However, back in ancient times, because they didn't know that they could do this, at one point they had to have everybody be a farmer. So, how did irrigation lead to a surplus of food and division of labor? Irrigation allowed their crops to receive water constantly. So now they don't have to wait until the river floods, get as much as they can, and then farm based off of that. Being able to make the canals and use the levees allowed them to use irrigation and get water to the crops constantly, which caused them to produce a surplus of food. So it caused them to have more food than they needed. This allowed many people to stop farming and concentrate on other jobs, causing a division of labor to develop. So if you need a little bit of extra time to write this down, please pause, write it down, and when you come back, we'll keep going. All right, so division of labor. In the Stone Age, everybody had to be a farmer because there was only a little bit of time where you were able to farm, and you had to get enough food for everybody. So everybody had to farm. There were no other options. But now, you could have one farmer, and not just one farmer, but just for explanation purposes, you could have one farmer who farmed all year long. And then somebody who used to be a farmer could focus on law enforcement and become, in this case, a police officer. However, back then they didn't have police officers, but you had somebody who could concentrate on government and keeping people safe. Or you could have somebody become a doctor and focus on being a doctor and focus on helping people get well. Musicians, artists, lumberjacks, masons. Okay, so now all these people are able to do different jobs. So now all of a sudden you have somebody who can focus on keeping people healthy. You have someone who can focus on building homes. You can have someone who can focus on keeping people safe. Nobody had to be stuck being a farmer. You could do different jobs based on what you were good at. All right, so that is it for today's lesson. When you go onto Edmodo, you will have a quiz on there. I'd like you to please answer those questions. They are not in your workbook at this point. You can just answer them on Edmodo. If you'd like to write them down, you can write them down on a separate sheet of paper. If you have any questions, please be sure to post them to Edmodo so we can go over them in class tomorrow.